everyone, it's Missy, and today I'm going to be making some pumpkin bread in my Hamilton Beach home baker bread maker. And just some notes before we begin. This bread maker is a 2-pound loaf capacity, so if you have the older 1-pound loaf capacity, you may need to cut the recipe in half. Make sure that your ingredients are all at room temperature before you begin the baking process. And also, if you want to make sure that your loaf is truly gluten-free, make sure that all the ingredients are certified gluten-free before you begin. So, let's get started. The first thing to note is I needed to grease my bread pan, and I just used a cooking spray and I made sure that my paddle is in there, so I'm ready to go with my ingredient placement. If you have a different bread maker, please consult your user manual. In my user manual, I need to have the liquid ingredients on the bottom and the dry ingredients on top, and this could be in reverse order for your model of machine. And also, if you don't have my exact bread maker, I'll be using the quick bread setting, and I'll show you the timetable chart for that so you can program yours. My quick bread setting is 1 hour and 40 minutes long, and in those hour and 40 minutes, it's 1 hour and 20 for just baking, and the other 20 minutes are mixing the dough and letting it rest. So if you don't have this 1 hour and 40 minute cycle, you can do the dough cycle and just have your mixture mixing and kneading for 20 minutes, and then you can turn it to the bake, and then you can have it bake for 1 hour and 20 minutes. And you might want to do that even if you have this bread maker, because if you have it on the dough cycle, you can actually reach in your hand, pull out the paddle, and then bake it. Then you don't have this big hole on the bottom of your loaf. But for me, I don't mind having a hole there. It's on the bottom. Nobody sees it really until you cut into the very middle of it. So that I'll leave up to you. For my wet ingredients, 1 cup of canned pumpkin puree, and I have 2 eggs, 1/3 cup vegetable oil, and 1 teaspoon vanilla. And if you're using fresh pumpkin puree, make sure there's a chart that you're supposed to go by. Fresh pumpkin puree actually has more water in it than canned pumpkin puree. So I think you would use 1/2 cup, but I'm not sure. You'd have to look that up before you use it. And then for my dry ingredients, I have 1.25 cups of brown rice flour. You could also use white rice. For my sugar, I have 1/2 cup of white granulated sugar and 1/2 cup of brown sugar. If you only have one kind of sugar, that's perfectly fine. I would go with 1 full cup of granulated sugar, but if you want 1 cup of brown sugar, that's fine too. You'll get more of a moist bread, so you have to watch your liquid content there. And then for the spices, I'm using, all my spices are measured out. You can use 2 teaspoons, like 1.5, 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice if you want to, but that's generally not gluten-free. And you can also adjust the spice amounts, but the baking components you have to have just so your bread raises like you want it to. And starting from the top and working clockwise, I'm going to start with this first white clump there. That's 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, and then I have 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of xanthan gum, you can also use guar gum, and 1/4 teaspoon salt. So you have to have those 4 like they are. And then on the bottom, I have 1 teaspoon ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg, 1/8 teaspoon cloves, that little dark patch right there, and then 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger. So like I said, you can mix up those spices to your taste. I also didn't add this, but it's optional. You can add 1/4 to 1/2 cup of nuts, or you can add chocolate chips, or you can add dried fruit, whatever you like. Just make sure it's not more than 1/2 cup, and make sure that those items are also gluten-free. But I like my pumpkin bread plain Jane, so this is the ingredient mixture I'm going to be using. So we're ready to get started mixing. And I just generally take a fork to mix my ingredients together, but I'm going to mix my dry ingredients together first. So I'm going to add my sugar to my flour. and then all my spices and baking components. And I'm just going to give that a good whisk. It doesn't have to be mixed completely thoroughly because your bread maker is of course going to be kneading the dough, but to make sure that it's just thoroughly combined so you don't have any lumps, especially the brown sugar likes to clump up. So. Alright. And then we can do our wet ingredients, and the first thing I'm actually going to do is beat the eggs. There we go. And you always want to beat your eggs in gluten-free baking. It just makes the baking process a lot better. I don't know the exact science behind that, but whenever I forget to beat the eggs, my bread or cake or whatever I'm making just doesn't turn out quite right. So the eggs and the pumpkin go together. I'm also going to be adding the oil. And then I'm going to add the vanilla. Alright, and then all we have to do is kind of mix, mash it all together. That smells good. I can't wait for Thanksgiving, and this already smells like a lovely pumpkin pie because it's basically the same mixture of spices and everything. Oh, it smells so good. Okay. So once you have all that together, you can add it to the bread pan, and like I said, I'll be adding the wet ingredients first. Make sure we get all that in there. There we go. And then I want to add in my dry ingredients. Now I'm ready to put it in my bread maker. Of course, I'm going to show you guys how I set this up. So I'm choosing my quick bread cycle, which for me is number 4. I want to make sure that my crust is on light, and then it doesn't allow me to choose my loaf size. I could do 1.5 or 2 pound loaves, but quick bread is just default. So I'm ready to start mixing. And after about 3 minutes of mixing, you're going to want to go in with your scraper and make sure that all the sides are scraped down so it's mixed thoroughly. And you can see it mixing away in there. And I'll come back when it's done. Okay, so my bread maker alarm just went off that it is done. So I'm actually just going to unplug this. I'll lift up the cover so you can see. There's a lot of steam coming out. There we go. That looks so good. It smells so amazing. So I'm going to take the loaf, invert it onto a cooling rack, and we'll let that cool for 10 to 15 minutes. So here I have the bread on the cooling rack, and I forgot to mention that if you want to see if it's done, you can insert a toothpick into the center, and if it comes out clean, it should be done. But yeah, it's this beautiful golden brown. I absolutely love how this turned out, considering that I created this recipe myself. So I can't wait to cut this open. So I'm going to transfer this over to my cutting board. There we go. And then we'll slice off a piece and we'll see how I did. Oh, that looks so good. We got a nice crumb, nice even texture. I'm gonna just break a piece off so I can taste it. With a little bit of cream cheese, that is gonna be so delicious. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.